Hello, and welcome to this training on TestCenter IQ Analyzer Filters. I'm starting with the application open, and I'm going to dismiss the welcome screen. I'm going to connect the chassis and reserve ports, and select a predetermined chassis and ports. I'll be using 2 ports back to back for this demonstration, and I'm going to set to add Layer 3 default traffic. Adding Layer 3 default traffic is based on the settings for the IP and MAC addresses for your devices. My ports are connected back to back, so I'm not too concerned about what those are. But adding default traffic will create a device on each test port. You can see I have device 1 and 2. And it will create a stream block for a full mesh pattern between all ports that I've reserved. In this case, there's only 2 ports, so it's basically just a bidirectional port pair. I'm going to rename the ports, not append the location to them. It's always a good idea to name your ports, something that makes sense to you. What we found in the first releases of the Sparent TestCenter IQ Analyzer Filters is we ran into some issues if the ports had the same name. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that now. Let's also look at the TestCenter IQ settings. There is no special setting to select for the Analyzer Filters function, but we do need to make sure that stream-based results are enabled, which they are by default. Now, since we're talking about analyzer filters, we can look at each port's analyzer. And the default is the 32-bit filter over the stream ID, and no other filters enabled. So essentially, the analyzer filters will be looking for the Sparent TestCenter signature field and only track frames that contain those, which of course is part of the Sparent TestCenter PGA traffic generation and analysis capabilities. Let's first look real quick at classic results. And I'll go ahead and pin those up here. And I'm going to change a result view to our filtered stream results. And what I'll mention is that the difference with the TestCenter IQ filtered stream results and the classic filtered stream results is, as you'll see in a moment, we have analyzer preload automatically enabled for TestCenter IQ. So in classic mode, nothing will show up unless you select Enable Analyzer Preload. But as we'll see in a moment, that's not necessary for TestCenter IQ. Let's go ahead and toggle to TestCenter IQ, which will launch in my default browser, Chrome. And now we're presented with the TestCenter IQ results library. The top item, which shows test in progress status, is our currently running test. I'm going to go ahead and select it. And it will load the basic results profile since all I've done is enabled PGA. Basic results profile has traffic health indicators, summarized basic traffic results, and port frame rate chart. So I'm going to go ahead and add the filtered stream results to the middle here. And as I was mentioning with Analyzer Preload, you'll notice that both ports automatically show up. If I had multiple stream blocks already configured rather than just the 2, I would see multiple entries here as well. I can filter out one or more ports or one or more stream blocks by adding a condition to do so. In this case, I'm going to add a filter where the receive port contains port 1. Apply my condition, and now you can see only port 1 is displayed. Let me go ahead and remove that condition for the rest of this demonstration. I'm going to go back to classic view, or at least I'm going to go back to the Spirent Test Center application and start my traffic. So now you can see even in classic mode, since I'm receiving traffic, the received results will show up in the filtered stream results. One difference between classic 2 is I can only select the view for one port at a time. Let's go ahead and go back to TestCenter IQ. So now let's look at our filtered stream results and go into Edit. And you'll notice, if you're familiar with Spirent Test Center from before, we have a 32-bit filter, which I mentioned a moment ago is by default over the stream ID. And we have 4 16-bit filters where we can enable filters on other things like IP address, type of service fields, and so on and so forth. These are all what we call custom filters, which are basically just hexadecimal number displays. We'll see in a moment that when we enable template filters, we'll have a nice display which tells us what type of statistic that filter is tracking at the time. So right now we're essentially just tracking on our stream ID. Back in the Spirent Test Center application, I'm going to enable a template filter for the IPv4 source address. And I'm going to apply. And back to Spirent Test Center IQ. And now we can see our analyzer filter acting on the IPv4 source address. And since we only enabled it for port 1, port 2 shows essentially NA. One thing I like to do sometimes is not just filter on Spirent Test Center traffic, but just filter on any traffic. And in order to do that, I'm going to go back to the application. And I'm going to simulate as though I was receiving non-Spirent Test Center traffic. Go ahead and stop my traffic while I'm resetting this. I'm going to edit my stream blocks and uncheck Include Signature Field. So without the signature field included, the receive filters are not detecting this as Spirent Test Center generated traffic. In fact, I need to go back to port 1 analyzer and disable the 32-bit filter over the stream ID because that would require the signature field to be there. Remember that I did set the source IP filter. And let's go to port 2 and do something similar, disable the 32-bit filter. And just for grins, I'm going to select the IPv4 destination address instead. And I'll go ahead and apply. Go ahead and start my traffic again. Toggle back to TestCenter IQ. And now we can see, even though we're not receiving signature-based frames, so really these could have been frames coming from anywhere on the network, we're still tracking them. And you can see the difference where I enabled the source IPv4 filter on port 1 and the destination IPv4 filter on port 2. And we can also, if we go into Edit, we can see how those were automatically added to the 10 columns in view. Thank you for taking the time to view this video demonstration of TestCenter IQ Analyzer filters.